Live NFL trivia every Wednesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge for a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation.
When you've been traumatized by something and it came completely out of nowhere, you expect the same thing to happen again, even if the scenarios are completely different. I'll give you an example. Let's say you're a fan of a team, and you've witnessed them collapse in the fourth quarter of a ton of games so far this season. Now you're watching a completely separate game with that team, which is an independent event, and your team is up by 42 points with 5 minutes left. There is no way whatsoever that they're going to blow this game, yet you have that feeling in the back of your mind because of everything that's happened before, even though it's completely unrealistic. Well, in 1988, Colorado felt that way, and it cost them a cool $500,000. That's right. Sometimes you can make really poor decisions when you have a fear of the past, and in 1988, that's exactly what happened with the Buffaloes, when they lost out on a pretty substantial payday because of their fears, however well-founded they were. Because in 1988, they passed on one bowl game to play in another, even though this one paid out significantly less. It was a disaster that, adjusted for inflation, cost Colorado over $1.2 million. Anytime you make a decision so poor that you wind up 7 figures in the red because of it, yeah, that's not good. And this is the story behind one of the biggest regrets in the history of the Colorado football program. Before I talk about the awful decision made by Colorado that they would live to regret, we need some context to understand not just how Colorado was doing in 1988, but also how they were doing in 1987. On paper, the 1987 season was an extremely successful one for the Buffaloes. They finished the year with a 7-4 record, which was the highest winning percentage for the school since 1977, and was the highest winning percentage that the legendary and eventual College Football Hall of Fame head coach Bill McCartney had in his tenure with the Buffaloes at the time. However, despite their great season, to the surprise of a lot of people, Colorado did not make it to a bowl game. It definitely felt somewhat odd that they missed out, as you didn't see too many power conference teams with 7 or more wins missing bowls if the teams themselves didn't personally decline the invitation. Colorado, despite their 7-4 record, and despite 10 teams having a worse record than them getting invited to bowls at the time the bowl games were announced, was not invited to a bowl. It seemed like Colorado was the biggest snub of the bowl season, and understandably, Coach McCartney was upset about this. He said that the 1987 team, which was not going bowling, was a better team than the 1985 and the 1986 teams that went bowling, adding that he felt that they deserved strong consideration. And Dave Platty, the sports information director for Colorado, said that he thought the Buffaloes were in the pictures for the Aloha Bowl and the All-American Bowl. Even other coaches came to Colorado's defense, with Kansas State head coach Stan Parrish saying on Colorado, "I said all week that they should have been a bowl team. That's a great injustice." What happened in 1987 was somewhat surprising. But in 1988, Colorado came back with a chip on its shoulder, wanting to make sure that there was no possible way that bowl committees could overlook them this time. And to their credit, they did just that. By the time the regular season ended, Colorado was 8-3, making it the first time since 1976 that Colorado won 8 games in a season, and making it the best regular season under McCartney's tenure thus far. On November 8th, they were even ranked in the AP poll, making it the first time since October 9th, 1978 that they were ranked at any point. They started the season off 4-0, winning all 4 of their non-conference games, including a win on the road against a ranked Iowa team, making it the first time ever that McCartney won a ranked game on the road, and making it the first time since October 28, 1978 that they won a ranked game on the road, when they defeated Missouri 28-27. They had an incredible rushing attack led by sophomore running back Eric Bieniemy, who ended the season with 1,243 rushing yards, which ranked inside the top 10 of the entire NCAA. They had a stout defense that ranked inside the top 20 of Division I A in points allowed, and held 4 of their 11 opponents to less than 10 points. And even though they lost 7-0 to Nebraska, the fact that they held Nebraska to 7 points was jaw-dropping, and showed just how good Colorado was. Remember that Nebraska was a ranked team that was averaging 46 points per game so far during the season, and had scored at least 63 points in 3 of those games. Bottom line, Colorado was an awfully good team. It was the best team that McCartney had at the time, and was definitely the best season so far in the 1980s for the Buffaloes. It was very clear and very obvious that based off of how well they played, as well as the quality of the opponents that they played, that they were going to go bowling and playing some late December or early January football. They were not going to get snubbed again. And they didn't have to wait long to learn their fate, as the Freedom Bowl out in Anaheim, California, made them an offer to play. Colorado immediately accepted, making this their second appearance ever in the Freedom Bowl. Even though the game only started in 1984, this was already the second time in 5 years that the Buffaloes were playing in it, as they played in 1985 in the second installment of the game when they lost 20-17 to Washington. Unlike last year, Colorado is not going to be watching bowl season on their couch. There's just one small problem. Colorado could have done a heck of a lot better. And I mean a heck of a lot better. Now we have to point out some incredibly key differences between the 1987 team and the 1988 team to truly explain why these fears were entirely based off of what happened the year before and were not whatsoever based on the merits of the 1988 team. To make a long story short, in every metric possible that you want to use, the 1988 Buffaloes had a better resume than the 1987 Buffaloes. Entering bowl season in 1987, Colorado was 7-4. Entering bowl season in 1988, Colorado was 8-3. Advantage goes to the 1988 team, and that one win makes a huge difference. In 1987, if you won 7 games, you were not guaranteed a bowl game at all. Case in point, Colorado. There were quite a few 7-win teams from 1987, like UTEP, Kent State, and Wake Forest, that missed out. But if you won 8 games in 1987, you were in. There were 27 teams to have at least 8 wins, and all 27 of them made it to a bowl. So based off of that precedent, Colorado had absolutely nothing to worry about in 1988 with their 8-3 record. On top of that, the 1987 team laid an egg against good competition. Colorado played 3 teams that year that were ranked, going 0-3 and losing all of those games by at least 3 possessions, falling 42-17 to a ranked Oklahoma State team, falling 24-6 to a ranked Oklahoma team, and falling 24-7 to a ranked Nebraska team. Getting outscored 90-30 by an average of 20 points per game against ranked competition is not going to help you out. Plus, Colorado lost a game at home to Oregon, who in the middle of November, when the bowl selection committees were really debating on who to take, was a team below 500. Their resume was not good. Their 3 non-conference wins were against teams below 500, including a win against a 1-11 Colorado State team, and they did not beat a single team with a winning record, as their 7 wins came against teams with a combined record of 18-57-3, which comes out to a winning percentage of 25%. 3 of those wins came against teams that finished the season with either no wins or 1 win. Colorado beat up on bad teams and got beaten up by good teams. The 1988 team, on the other hand, that was a completely different story. The 1988 team actually beat a ranked team, defeating number 19 ranked Iowa on the road in their second game of the season by a final score of 24-21. And yes, they lost all 3 ranked games in conference play, but the outcomes were respectable, with a loss to a ranked Oklahoma team being a 3-point game and a loss to a ranked Nebraska team being a 7-point game. Plus, they destroyed Fresno State 45-3, and Fresno State would finish the regular season with a 9-2 record and would be the champions of the Big West. And on top of that, the 1988 Colorado team averaged more points per game and allowed fewer points per game than the 1987 team. In other words, if you take the emotions out of it and you take the fears from last year's snub out of it, Colorado had absolutely nothing to fear. If you were looking at Colorado's resume from the outside, you would have said they were a slam dunk to go bowling. Yet, just like the insecure person on a dating app who decides to match with someone not necessarily because they like them, but because they're happy that someone actually matched with them and they're worried that no one else will, Colorado did that same exact strategy and had that same mindset during the 1988 bowl season. Because immediately after the Freedom Bowl came calling their name, they accepted the offer. Again, as mentioned before, Colorado was not going to have its shortage of bowl games to choose from. This was one of the best teams to ever play in the Freedom Bowl. Just to give you an idea, the year before in 1987, the Power Conference representative for the game was Arizona State, who entered at 6-4-1. In 1986, UCLA entered the game with 7 wins. In 1985, Washington was 6-5 and Colorado was 7-4. And for the very first Freedom Bowl in 1984, Texas and Iowa both entered with 7 wins. While making a bowl game is a very big deal, especially back in 1988 when there weren't 10,000 bowl games to choose from, by accepting this invite, Colorado was, at least from a wins perspective, the best Power Conference team to ever play in the game. They could have done better, but they were so scarred from what happened in 1987 that they took the Freedom Bowl invite. And just moments after they took the invite, they got a phone call from a 904 area code. It was the Gator Bowl. and it was at that moment that Colorado realized that they messed up badly. On the morning of Sunday, November 13th, the Gator Bowl called, and they asked Colorado if they wanted to play in the game. And Colorado was forced to decline the invite because they had just taken the offer from the Freedom Bowl. And this decision was extremely costly because the Gator Bowl was better in literally every single way. From a prestige standpoint, there was no contest. The Freedom Bowl was an upstart bowl game on December 29th held at a baseball stadium where Colorado was going to enter as the greatest power conference team to participate, while the Gator Bowl was a New Year's Bowl that had been around since 1946 and routinely drew ranked teams. The Freedom Bowl was competing for exposure on the same day as the All-American Bowl down in Birmingham. As a side note, if you want to learn more about a famous moment in All-American Bowl history, click the card in the upper right corner. Meanwhile, the Gator Bowl was competing against nothing, as because New Year's Day in 1989 was on a Sunday, most bowls moved to January 2nd, except for the Gator Bowl, which was the only bowl game taking place on New Year's Day. There was a significant difference in television exposure as well. The Gator Bowl was nationally televised on ESPN, while the Freedom Bowl was syndicated via the Ms. Lou television network. But even if we don't take any of that into account, this decision was costly because of what each bowl paid out to the teams. By playing in the Freedom Bowl, each participant in the game, win or lose, received $515,000. Want to know how much money each team makes for playing in the Gator Bowl? Only a cool $1 million. By panicking and taking the Freedom Bowl offer, Colorado cost itself $485,000. That is a lot of money. But now, let's adjust that number for inflation, because obviously, things are different now than they were in 1988. The cumulative rate of inflation since then is 143%. This means that if that same mistake happened today, it would have cost Colorado somewhere in the ballpark of $1.2 million. Missing out on seven figures because you weren't confident enough to bet in yourself, even though everyone on the outside could have told you that you should have, has gotta feel painful. And sure, maybe Colorado could have been okay with the seven-figure loss had they actually won the game, because you can't really put a price on winning, and ending the season with your first bowl win since 1971 and just your fifth bowl win ever is worth the pay cut, and is more helpful to the program. But I can't even say that, because they lost the Freedom Bowl, losing 20-17 to BYU, and for the Cougars, trailing 17-14 in the fourth quarter, hit the game-tying and game-winning field goals, scoring the final 6 points of the game. So not only did they make a big mistake financially, but they didn't even get to benefit from it on the field. This is like the equivalent of a team paying an opponent to come to their stadium to play them in a guarantee game, and then losing that game. Except this time, it was during bowl season of all things. So what's the moral of the story? Don't be afraid to bet on yourself. Seriously, if it's entirely justified, everyone else is saying you should do it, and the only thing holding you back is an entirely independent event that has no bearing and no relation whatsoever on the current thing in question, then go ahead and bet on yourself. Because it's safe to say that in 1988, Colorado learned this lesson the hard way. And I definitely say that losing seven figures is a pretty harsh way to learn a punishment.
Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. So you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.